what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Sec Tech Podcast. My name is Matt Lemke. We are joined today, of course, by our co-host, Ken Williamson. Ken, how you doing?
Doing well. Just still hot here.
It is hotter. It's insane how hot it is. We're going to get to that in a second. First, I got to introduce our guest, Ryan Campbell. Ryan has over 40 years of experience in the tech world. He's a tech enthusiast turned CEO. Recently built a healthcare data company that was doing over $6 million in revenue. Amazing person. Can't wait to talk just about tech, about business, and about life. But let's start with life because, guys, we're in Oklahoma. I lived in like South Texas, right? Like the Corpus Christi area, which is like one of the hottest areas in America. And I used to always look at the weather here in Tulsa because, you know, we lived here, we moved there, came back. And I envied the Tulsa weather because I would look on the app and it would be like 115 degrees there and it would be like 90 here. And I'm like, oh, man. And now it's reversed. It is hotter in Tulsa, Oklahoma right now than it is in Houston and Corpus. It's crazy how hot it is.
Yeah, it's pretty hot.
Yeah, for sure. I'm at the point now where my air conditioner can't even hardly keep up upstairs. So I'm like, every day I'm contemplating, do I want to move my office downstairs somehow? But then I'm just like, okay, this is going to pass. And in 3 weeks, it's going to be cool again.
Right.
And so we're just, work in my boxers. It doesn't matter. Like they only see me in the meetings from the Ryan and I, we're working on a project together right now.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to tell him how often I'm not wearing pants on those meetings.
Yeah, thanks. I don't want to know that. What's interesting is where my office is, I'm sitting literally right under an air vent. So it's 100 and whatever outside. And I end up putting sweats on because our air conditioner will not go off because it's so hot. Right. And I got cold air blowing on me. So I feel like an idiot really because, it's 100 degrees outside and I got my sweats on. So
yeah, no, I can empathize with that because my house is just hot. So, we have like an older home. Like our home was like, probably 50s if I had to guess. I haven't looked. Probably the original windows. So I mean, it's just, same thing, man. Our poor AC cannot keep up. And, my wife was worrying the other day. She was like, what happens if the AC goes out? I'm like, we're moving. Like we're going to go stay at an extended stay. I'm not staying in a hot, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. I'm not staying here. That's all I know, but yeah, it's crazy. But that is the benefit of remote work. It's hard to be a software engineer sometimes. We got to deal with a lot of problems, but at least you can deal with them in your boxers when you need to. That's a perk.
So something else that's interesting, the listeners probably don't know this about you, Matt, but you are a whiskey connoisseur.
Big time.
And Ryan is also a whiskey connoisseur.
Yeah.
So tell me, guys, I am not at all a connoisseur. Like when I was young, I was drinking, but I was not drinking for the taste. And so it was all just like the cheap rot gut whiskey that you can get, the $5 bottle. So, but tell us a little about what's your favorite right now, Ryan?
My favorite right now, that sort of goes back and forth. I'm doing a lot in, Kings County whiskey right now, and they're pretty good. And Widow Jane, those are two I've been kind of hitting. Then of course, the daily stuff. I have some stuff that when I just go up, cause I have about 160 bottles of whiskey. So
wow,
and sometimes you just go up and you can't figure out what you want. So I have some old Granddad that I drop to, or Gentleman's Jack, or Wild Turkey 101, just some staple stuff that. When I can't make up my mind what I want, I'm just like, all right, I'll just have one of these.
Yeah, I tend to do the same thing. I like to, when I'm on those days where it's like, I don't really know what I want. I like to go to the store picks that I have. So in whiskey, what essentially happens in distribution is, they make the whiskey in the barrels and then they just package it all together and ship it out. But what a lot of stores will do is you as a store owner, you would go down to the warehouse and try a bunch of barrels. And then whatever barrel was your favorite, because whiskey, it's never linear. Every whiskey's different. It's always going to have different notes. It depends on the elevation of where they store it, what time of the year it was curated, when it was pulled out. I mean, there's so much that goes into it, the amount of years. And so you'll go and you'll try a bunch of barrels, whatever is your favorite, you buy that barrel. And then your store will be the only one that will have that barrel of whiskey. And so they call it a store pick. And so I'll go into like a lot of the store picks because they're all so different. And, right now what I do a lot is like, Jack Daniel's has a single barrel, right? And so I'll try the standard single barrel, but then I'll try a single barrel store pick, and see if I can pick up on the different notes, because whiskey's a lot like anything. As you drink it more, your taste buds will dial into the notes, and so you'll begin to taste, the fruits in it, or the wheat, the different types, and
Yep.
and so you kind of just start to compare and contrast, and it's a lot of fun. I think my favorite right now is anything coming out of EHT, the EHT barrel proofs and the single barrels. The small batch, are they a Weller product?
I
can't remember.
I don't think they're part of the Buffalo Trace distilleries.
I don't think so either. I can't remember. But EHT, they come in these big tubes, so you can kind of always know. But anything EHT is phenomenal.
Cool. So
yeah, it's good.
So I'll ask kind of a simple question. How do you drink whiskey? You drink it with water, with neat, on ice? What's the connoisseur's way?
I do neat every time. I used to drink a long time ago. I would have it on the rocks, but no longer. I drink it neat. And occasionally there's certain whiskeys that you can open up with a couple of drops of water.
Yeah.
That'll be better, but 99% of the time it's just neat.
Yeah, same. You because oftentimes with whiskey, like you don't pour 8 ounces at a time. You pour like 2. So stored at room temperature, always drink it neat and drink it fairly quickly. Like it's not something like I'll sip on over like 2 hour span, because then it opens up too much, it aerates, and it'll just kind of dilute even if it's just neat. So you kind of need to drink it within like a 20-minute span. And so yeah, always neat, always within about 20 minutes. Always about 2 ounces though. Never too much.
Yeah.
So
I sip a little longer than you do. It takes me about an hour.
Okay.
Yeah,
you go an hour.
Yeah.
Do you what's your pour size typically?
I usually do about 2 fingers.
2 fingers. Okay. Yeah. So 2 to 4 ish.
Yeah.
That makes sense. No, whiskey. I mean, it's just like anything, man. And I don't know if it's just like our tech background. I mean, I'm sure, we've talked about even some of your hobbies where anything you do, you can get so like into just the fine details, the intricacies, it's a lot of fun.
No, that's what I love about talking to people about what they're passionate about, is because everything in the world has a ton of nuance to it. And talking to someone that's passionate about something, they can really open you up to some of that nuance. And so, I think that's all really awesome. But we are a tech podcast, so we might talk a little bit about that. I'm really happy to have Ryan with us today. Working with him on this project has been great. He's obviously very skilled at what he does, has a lot of experience in this space. And like Matt mentioned at the before we started, we kind of wanted to start, tell us a little bit about how you got started in all of this and how your path to this point.
So it's interesting. So I went to school a long time ago because I'm much older than you guys, right? So, so in my high school, when I was junior, I believe, maybe junior or sophomore, they brought the computers into the high school. It's the first time they had ever had computers in the high school. So the problem is nobody knew how to set them up. They had no idea. So I was like, okay, I'll try. And that's how I got into computers. I started reading books, and I figured out how to set them all up and get them running. And it was, you're going to laugh, it's on Commodore 64s, right? Just DOS, nothing else, And then the the basketball coach there came to me and said, I want a statistics program. Can you write a statistics program? Well, they had business basic. That was the only language on there. So I dug into that and I figured out how to do that. I'm sure my reports were very sexy back then.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. And so that's really kind of what kicked it off. I mean, and I got very interested in like what you could do with computers, and it just sort of went from there. I never went to college for any of that. I just kept digging in, pretty much self-taught for the whole way.
That's awesome.
And a completely different ecosystem then. Now developers coming up, there's all these online tools and Google and now ChatGPT. But when you say that you learned how to do it, you legitimately read books.
I read books and made thousands of mistakes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, completely different way to go about it back then, just because there weren't all the resources that we have now. Really, developers now have it easy. If there's something that you're worried, that you're wondering about, and you can't figure it out in 5 or 10 minutes in Google searching, then this must be a pretty old technology, because everything, is on Google, ChatGPT, Stack Overflow. But, and in this time, there wasn't anything like that. It was just, read some books, some documentation, and then trial and error. And that's all you had.
That was it.
Yeah, really. Yeah, that's something, I really want to dive into. We've got a coworker named Greg who's been doing this for a long time. And we're going to have him, I think, on the podcast soon. And he and I were talking about that because he's, about 40 years, of experience. And I literally asked him one day because, I came up through the boot camp a couple of years ago, and I said, okay, there had to have been a time when you couldn't just Google like what you needed to do. And there was probably also a time where technologies were fairly new like they are today, And so I was like, there had to have been a time too, there's no book. Like, what'd you do? And he was just telling me, you had to you had to go read the manual about the processor and the computer, and then you had to read the manual about, the language, that you were teaching or that you were learning, and you just had to connect the dots. There's no one to connect the dots. So you had to go, okay, I know what the computer can do, I know what the program can do, right, and then I have to figure out how to blend them, right?
Right, and there was no syntax editors or anything. And it's just, it was all green screen. So you think about it, you're typing. It would be like writing code in Notepad, right? And
Notepad++ was even a thing for a while, right?
Yeah, I mean, you
it's crazy.
And if it errors, it's like it erred.
Okay. Seg fault, right? You're
right.
organizing in C, and they just say, "Oh no, we dumped."
Right.
Yeah. We don't even know where or why.
Somewhere in the 4,000 lines of code, you have an error.
You have an error. Wow. Yeah. I think it's really interesting. You went from developer. You did some architecture, enterprise architecture, and then you went in as a CEO. What was that transition like, going from just that tech space into now tech and business? What was that like for you?
Yeah, well, so I've always been sort of entrepreneurial too.
Okay.
So I've always had kind of businesses on the side, and I've always sort of had a foot in the operation side and a foot in the tech side. So even when I was a developer and doing development work, I would get over into the operations side of what I was developing for and understand it and figure it out and all that. Because, a lot of the places that I, did this in financial institutions and so forth, as far as like requirements and stuff, it's like, well, go talk to Jim over there. That's he knows. Right.
Yeah.
And that's how you got requirements and everything. I mean, it was just, it wasn't really matured, I guess, as a process. So, so really during the career, I became one of those people that could just bridge business and technology. Right. And so I did development. I did a lot more database development. I did some web development. I certainly did some mostly Visual Basic stuff. I did a little bit in C# because C# was, about the time C# came out is about when I started exiting development and going more into the management side of things.
Yeah.
But I did write one app in C# because I wanted to be able to say that I coded in C#. So I wrote one app in C# right after it came out. I've stayed in on the data side pretty much everywhere, but, you know, and it just sort of, it was sort of a asset as I moved into management, right? And is to have that technical background because I could have conversations with the technical folks, and it wasn't like, you know, this side speaking one language and this side speaking another language. And so I just found that to be useful in my career, and it helped advance me in my career. And because I'm kind of entrepreneurial on top of that, you know, it started the process of me kind of getting into small companies that were tech, and then ended up, you know, eventually founding one. And it's an interesting thing when you start moving into the executive level and having discussions with other executives to really start to see the gap between what the C-suite understands about technology, especially in the business world, maybe not in tech companies, but, you know, over and then them trying to direct technology on the other side. And so it's an interesting dynamic to watch on the outside and look in, but I mean, that's kind of the journey, and that's how I ended up starting a company and you know, being a C-suite guy. And so.
No, I think you hit on a couple of things. One thing that I think is really important that you said is that having a little bit of a technical background allowed you to communicate with your dev team. And that is something that we've talked about numerous times on the podcast, is it just feels like a lot of times a lot of these higher level business people kind of think of tech like magic. You know, it's just like, I just want this to do what I want it to do. And then, you know, almost like the developers are wizards and they just accept whatever you're saying as truth. But you had the ability, coming from a tech background, to kind of, you know, detect, okay, is this person putting me on? Like, what's really the issue here? Where are we going wrong? And I'm sure that really served you well. Like, can you talk a little bit about that versus what you saw in other places and with other companies and how they dealt with that?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of times in companies, like when business people come to the technology group, right? They come and they want to tell you, here's what I want, but they don't really tell you the what. They start trying to tell you how to build it, right?
Yeah.
They want to tell you how to build it and how to do this, and I mean, that comes from them using, I don't know, Word and Excel and whatnot, right? They think, oh, well, if Excel can do it, then you just do this. And you're right. The sort of magic thing is there. I think one of the things that I always drove, even when I was from a technology perspective or still in technology and working with business, is like, I want to know about your process.
Yes.
Just tell me about your process. Don't tell me how to build it. Because if I don't understand your process, I can't build anything for you. And so I've over the course, you know, of my career, it's basically been like process has to drive the technology, and technology then can optimize the process, right? Because then the technology, if you understand the process, like I'll give you an example of one thing. So I was working with a group, and they wanted to build this reconciliation process because they were doing it manually for this financial component. Yeah. But they had 60-some thousand positions, and so they clearly didn't reconcile 60,000 positions every day. So they were spot checking this thing, and so their first request was they wanted me to automate the spot check. And I was like, well, hold on. Like, just wait a minute. Tell me about the process. Like, what are you trying to do? And so they were telling me and all this stuff. And I said, okay, so if we understand the process, you realize that we can actually reconcile 60,000 positions every day. Yeah. And
we don't have to spot check.
Right. We don't have to spot check.
The computer can just work.
Yeah.
So, right. So
pretty powerful.
It's like more than 10 brains. Right. You know, right. So but you could sort of see in that moment, you could sort of see their head kind of explode a little bit, right? Because they're like, wait a minute, I can do what? Yeah. Right. So so it's that kind of interaction, but sometimes it's tough to have that type of interaction with business people because they're just, you know, they want to they want to tell you what to do. And so I think you just have to drive back to that process and put it back to like, if you want me to create value for you, I have to understand what you're doing. And if I'm just operating like a short order cook where you're just giving me a thing and I'm kicking it out, then I'm not gonna be happy with what I deliver, and neither are you.
Yeah, and then later on down the road, you're just gonna rewrite it because it's not. Yeah, because we took this short order approach. I love that analogy, and I love really what you're saying. Really, what it comes down to, I think is and something that I'm learning a lot, in technology is that clarity and communication are just the most important thing. I mean, Ken and I literally spent an entire episode last time talking about communication, and I think it's so important, and that's something, we, working within consulting that we have to really do on the front end is like, hey, so we'll come in and it's like, hey, I want you, I want you to do this specific thing. And it's like, okay, I first need to understand your entire business. And that's a hard thing for them to, for a lot of C-suite people to get on, because they just want you to execute.
Right.
Everything is education or execution. Everything's a dollar. I just need you to execute. And it's like, well, if I don't understand your business, I can do this. But like, if I don't know what your finance team is doing, I may do something that's going to end up costing them time and resources because I stepped on something that finance does every day, doing something for, your field workers or, your offsite locations, fixing something over there. And now, your entire day-to-day process just changed and it probably became less effective, even though, you're querying a report for whatever is better for, this group of people. You significantly slowed down this other group because we didn't really understand the full business.
Right. Right. You optimized one area,
right,
but then you negatively impacted a different area. And that happens all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And when I was in the corporate world, it happened all the time too. Right. One area, because, silos are prevalent in corporate America, right?
Right.
And so one area they optimize everything, but they don't think about any sort of inputs or outputs to their area, right? And so they mess those up, and then some other areas negatively impacted. And what you end up doing is you take sort of the status quo, you optimize one area, and then you create a firestorm over here somewhere else, and now you're in this rapid recovery mode, trying to either revert back or correct this or whatever. And so I used to say that in the company that I ran for a while, I used to say this when people would do things that would create those type of situations, because it happens to us even in technology, right? We get micro focused sometimes on things, and we zero in and then holy moly, we created a problem over here, right? And I would tell the people, like, let's don't create our own forest fires, right? Because the clients will create plenty of those for us.
Yes.
So let's try not to create our own. But it happens, and you guys ask, like, one of the things about me being in the C-level, one of the things I would say that I had that was a big advantage over a lot of C-levels, because I came into that through technology, and is, you used the word magic a while ago, right? And and one of the things they don't understand time and magic, right? Mm-hmm. They think like you magically should be able to do it, and you should be able to do it very quickly, and so understanding the time frame and being able to actually trust your guys, trust your development guys, because if Ken says it's going to take me 5 days to do this, then I believe Ken is probably going to take him 3 days because he's actually really good. But
Ken's a wizard.
Yeah. And, but it's not about, it's like, but I have to have it. Now, I mean, clients, right? And I'm in this consulting thing with you now a little bit, right? And so that's been a little bit of an interesting thing for me, because that's new to me. And and they always think in time and
Right.
but they think in time of what they want, not in time of what it takes to get there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I always like to use the analogy of like, a pregnancy. It's like, well, it takes one woman 9 months to make a baby, right? But you can't get 9 women to make a baby in 1 month, right? Or growing crops, you can grow a crop of corn in 4 months or whatever, but 4 farmers can't grow a crop of corn in 1 month. Like there's a time element that just can't be adjusted. So no, I think that it's really important. And going back to what you were saying earlier about process, we as developers have to get a lot more interested in the what and the why in order to guide us into the how, right? Because so many people want to make it about the how. How do we accomplish these things? And so, I guess the question is like, how do you, as someone that understands this, communicate to your fellow business people to say, hey, let's stop trying to put these guys and trying to direct them on the how, and let's try to direct them on understanding what and why we're doing what we're doing, the vision.
Yeah. And there's 2 sides to that coin too, right? Because there are developers that really don't want to, it's like, just give me the requirements and I'll build it.
Right.
And it's like, right. So there is 2 sides to that.
Sure.
And you have to sort of balance that, right? I mean, you do need requirements, but you better understand those requirements, because it's really near impossible to be able to catch all the nuance of a business in requirements.
Yes.
And you don't have to, like, it's what I always tell the guys, like, you don't have to know enough to go sit down and do the job.
Right.
But you have to know enough to know that if you just struck a match, that you recognize that you struck a match.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's that. And I think it's a value conversation on both sides with that, because to say, look, if you want to tell me how to build it, then, I mean, in some cases, I think as a consultant, you might want to say, well, you should probably go get somebody else to do that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because
right.
if you want to tell me how to build it, we're not going to be happy.
Yeah, for sure.
But if you want to tell me, like, what's your business process and what outcomes are you looking for? You know, and what does success look like to you, right? These sound a little bit like the, buzzword type stuff, but they're true. Yeah. Right. If you don't know what success looks like, then how do you drive towards that? If you don't know what the outcome is supposed to be, then how do you drive towards that? But then from a development perspective inside of that, you can say, well, here's what the outcome looks like, and that's fine. It's like, okay, so let's work backwards from the outcome, and let's talk about the steps that we need to see. Like, what do we need to see along the path to make sure we hit that outcome? And I think if you sort of have those conversations with a client and put it forward and say, because I don't want to get 8 weeks out here and then the outcome's not what you want it to be. So I want to know what these steps are so that I can check myself and that you can check us and make sure that we're moving forward. So it's really, I think part of it is trying to get them to engage instead of dictate, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's kind of just comes back to management in a lot of ways, because, you were talking about, as a developer, as a developer, I haven't been in technology quite as long as you guys have, but I've been in long enough and met some people to know that there are those out there, developers who will gather requirements and spend, a meeting going, oh, why do we have to build it? Don't they know we could just do this and do that? And why do we have to do it this way? But then ultimately, they'll never raise those concerns to, anybody else. They'll just build what you told them to build because that's the job, right? Right. And they're kind of going, well, this doesn't make sense, but you told me to do it, Right. And so there's no communication up, right? And so they see these problems, they never communicate them. And then downwards, what tends to happen is, because that communication isn't going both ways, you kind of just, come in and dump the problems down and say, you know, can you guys as developers go and fix these problems? And then you walk away, they'll fix the problems and maybe complain about it. And then ultimately it just leads to a worse product. Whereas it's like, hey, let's get in a room, and instead of me just saying, hey, developer, go do this.
Right.
It's like, hey guys, here's the problem. What do you think? You know, like what's your initial thought on if we're here and we need to get here and here's some of the problems, just what are your thoughts? And you lay that out. And that's really, I think, a lot of what Agile kind of is and does, you know, having a product owner and, you know, or a scrum master and having the whole team going through requirements, talking from the business standpoint, you know, as a product owner, here's what the business needs. And then the developer being able to say, okay, well, do they know that there's these issues here, and if we do it that way, it's going to cause an issue here, and it just opens up the whole dialogue. And this is where, for me, again, I've never experienced anything but Agile and Scrum, but I can see why Agile has such a huge place now in technology. What has been your experience at seeing Agile come in and what it's done for the communication gap?
Yeah, so I'm not a purist in anything.
Sure.
I'll tell you that right up front. But I think some of us were probably doing Agile like things before Agile came around, right? But like right a long time ago, you go spend like months and months and months and write a book and then hand the book to the developer and say, here, develop this and write that, and then 9 months later you get something, right? I mean, I use 9 months because, right. And so I think some of the first things that happen is people start, especially, I can tell you one thing that happened is when we started getting componentized code, like, right, used to you write code in like a big block, right? And so when you started getting componentized code, then you can say, okay, well, wait, I can take my requirements down to the component level, right? And so that starts, and I think that all is sort of what brought all this stuff together. I like Agile, and I like the Scrum part of Agile. I think the Scrum is good because it sort of keeps everybody informed. On top of that, we used to also do something we called it architecture office hours, basically, and basically it was a slot on the calendar every day. And if you had, as a developer or as a business person, right, if you had something that you needed, that you were unsure about or unclear about, or something even new that, like, there appears to be a new requirement coming into this thing or whatever, right? You could report that in Scrum, but the Scrum's not the place to talk about that, right?
Right.
And so then we had that architecture office hours. If we didn't need it, then we didn't do it. But if we needed it, then we would bring architecture and development and business people and everything, and we would do just like exactly what you said. Here's the problem, or here's the thing, and this is what we need to change. And so here's some thoughts, here's this. And sometimes we come to solutions. Sometimes it would be like, we need to go back and do some research, and we're going to circle back. And but I think those type of forums and the idea of gathering, that's sort of been birthed out of this Agile about, keep things small and let's talk about the small things, right? You can tell I talk with my hands a lot.
No, it's great.
Yeah.
It's going to be great for the video.
Yeah.
So, you had mentioned you'd been an entrepreneur, you worked in tech, you became a CEO, and now you're kind of over with us on the consulting side a little bit. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that transition to consulting and the difference between being on the other side of the table? Because I know as a CEO, as a C-suite guy, you dealt with consultants and you dealt with developers that weren't part of your organization, and now you're over here doing it. But what's your impression seeing both sides of it?
Yeah, so it's so I sort of, when I came into this, it was like a toe in the water sort of thing, right?
Yeah,
and trying to, because it's a different environment for sure. I'm in the position I'm in. I'm kind of client facing a little bit. Well, not a little bit, a lot of it, right? Yeah. And so I think the interesting thing or the challenge, I would say, for me has been kind of translating that. Even I sort of did this as a CEO, but the difference is, as a CEO, when we had our clients, like I knew our clients very well. I knew their business. I knew what we were providing to them, and all of that, right? When I came into this, I had some background in the business where I'm facing, right? It's in healthcare, and so I have some background in that business, but they have all their own business nuances.
Yeah.
And I didn't know all those business nuances. And then I'm over with you guys, and you guys, SecTech, and right, they have their own set of processes, and so we're learning those processes, and I'm learning this, and so that was a little challenging in the beginning, but as I've sort of gotten into it a little bit more and understand it, I don't actually find it to be that much different.
Sure.
It's pretty much the same as it would be. I'm still dealing with the client. I'm still dealing with developers. It's a little bit nicer because I don't own the developers.
Sure. Right. You have somebody to complain to if things aren't going right.
Yeah. So there is that, right? But yeah, I think it was, I think it was a little different to get into, but I'm kind of finding my groove a little bit, and I don't think it's radically different, because the reason I say that, the same things are true, right? The client talks in time frame.
Yep.
Right.
And developers want to talk in points, and you got to try to figure out how to translate that, right?
Yep.
And what that is, and your points aren't the same as Greg's points, right? I mean, that's just
everybody's got their own thing that they're focused on.
Right.
Right.
And so once you sort of learn all that and understand all that and know that when developer X says it's going to be this long, it's actually going to be 2 days longer than that. And when developer Y says it's going to be this long, it's going to be 2 days less than that. And right. And
Basically Ken and I right there.
Yeah, right.
You guys.
I'm the over deadline guy. He's the under deadline guy every time.
Well, and you start to understand the nuance of the people, right?
Right.
And that's an important thing to understand, right? And I would say that's another advantage I have coming from a tech background, right? Because I understand that just because somebody says I'm going to have this done in 3 days, that doesn't actually mean it's going to be done in 3 days. It means from their perspective, and you learn what their perspective is, because some people one of the things that's interesting about the word done in development, right?
Sure.
Because done is different to like everybody, because there's like we're working with JD a lot, right?
Yeah.
And JD's a testing freak.
Yeah.
Right. Which is awesome.
Yeah.
JD,
no, definitely.
Right.
He was on this podcast.
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. JD Davis, who we had on, who we worked with.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So he was on here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when JD started working on our project, man, I got super excited because he's a testing freak, right?
Yeah.
I mean that in a good way,
Right.
So when you have developers like that, they get into that. When they say I'm done, I mean that means I've coded it, I've taken it through my functional testing, I'm doing it, and I'm 99% sure that everything is going to function exactly how I anticipated it to do.
Yeah. And we experienced that when we did testing where, there wasn't a whole lot of back and forth and going back to the drawing board. We were able to get through a lot of stuff. So yeah, I know what you mean. And then other developers, done means I'm code complete.
Right.
I think it's going to work.
I got that.
Yeah, that's so funny, man. It's 100% me. When I say I'm done, I just meant that the code's been pushed. I haven't tested anything. We all have our weaknesses here.
Hey, it's true, right? But it's about understanding what that means for everybody.
Right.
And then,
Yeah, we're coming up on our 45 minutes already, and so the last thing I wanted to ask you about was exactly what you just brought up, which is I was golfing not too long ago with a friend of mine who started up a little finance company that's really growing, doing some financial investments. He's got a developer working on some stuff for him, and the thing we were talking about is that, like some developers, not all, but most, maybe some, however, there's he's got an introverted developer, It's just him and this developer. And so, you know, there's no management. And so he's kind of, hey, here's what I need. And the developer just doesn't say much, you know? And so we were talking about it, and he was just like, you know, I think things are going well. The thing is I just don't know. I just don't really know, you know, because he just doesn't say much. Right. And so, and we talked about, you know, this, you know, in other scenarios on podcasts, but as a C-suite, you know, a C-level person who is talking to their developers, the developer team, what are some things that you have found that is a, you know, that's been successful in just helping the communication maybe between, you know, the high level of a CEO from the business perspective down to a developer and then back up? What are some things that you put in place, or just some things that you learned to do, you know, to really streamline communication?
Yeah, when I own developers, and I've actually been like to do this even with SecTech a lot, right? Is don't tell me how you're doing, show me how you're doing, right? And let's, you know, show me what you got, show me what it is. I know if you're a C-suite that doesn't understand code or whatever, that's fine. You don't necessarily have to, because what you also find is that will even start to, because you're talking to a developer about something they like to talk about. Right. And so that'll start to open that communication up, even if you are completely clueless about what they're talking about. Right. You try to ask some questions. Well, you know, ask the questions about data. Ask the questions about, well, how's a piece of data moving through? And they'll show you. And most developers, because they like to talk about their code, right? Yeah. I mean, I did when I developed, right? I mean, we all do, right? It's like, hey,
100%.
Look what I did, you know, right? And so I think, you know, for C-suite that doesn't have that tech background, it doesn't matter. Go embrace the tech background with them. Go embrace, you know, get them talking about what they do. And even if you don't understand it, eventually you guys will come together, you know, because it's just a matter of getting the communication lines open up. Yeah. And talking, and you know, I mean, most developers, they don't want to talk about finance. They're not going to want to sit and talk about finance, but they will talk about their code. And so if you're in finance and you're having them do something, talk to them about their code, and then talk about your financial data and how is it going through the code. Yeah. And eventually you'll open that up.
That's great. That's really good.
So, I mean, that's how I've done with most developers. Yeah. Like, show me, don't tell me.
Yeah. I think that's great advice. And, you know, like Matt said, time flies. It happened so quick, and here we are at the end. You know, I think, again, the big key that we take away is communication. You know, like you can't get away from people interacting together and seeing, you know, like I think what you said about show me, don't tell me is good advice, you know, and like you said, if they're not technical, C-suite, you know, there should be some output. Like there is an end goal, you know, right? Where are we getting to? Like what, you know, so I think everything was really great. I really appreciate you coming.
It was great.
Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will be back here in a few weeks with another amazing guest. Thank you so much to Ryan for just coming in and sharing so much wisdom, and we will see you guys soon.
Thanks for having me.